Dr. Rukmini Devi has been associated with this Brahmanical notion of, living and sort of, I don't know, I don't know if it's right to call it, but kind of the legacy of projecting it forward.
Mm.
But thank you for pointing that out, that she was quite open, and she revered and admired and even respected all religions, regardless of the religion that she belonged to. And now
Well,
I'm actually
she wasn't, she was a theosophist, so she had given up her Brahmanical ideas. And I think it's important to point that out because people keep saying Brahmin, Brahmin, but she wasn't a Brahmin.
Hi everyone, welcome to Movement and Me, an initiative that is designed for budding artists across the world who wish to pursue their career in art. I'm your host Niharika, and on this show you will hear artists talk about their lives and the choices they had to make in pursuit of arts. We will also get to use some tips and key learnings from the lives of these artists, along with a detailed discussion on their areas of interest. So quickly hop onto a journey into the world of arts along with us.
Today we have with us Miss Gitanjali Kolanad. As an artist with an experience of more than 40 years, Ms. Gitanjali often created multidisciplinary work arising out of collaborations with artists from other disciplines such as director Phillip Zarrilli, video installation artist Ray Langenbach, poet Judith Kroll, violinist Parmela Attariwala, to name a few. Her performances incorporated folk and ritual forms of dance, theatre, and martial art forms from South India. She has published numerous books and articles. One of them, called Culture Shock India, is currently in its third edition and has also been translated into Korean. She has also co founded Impact, Indian Martial and Performance Arts Collective of Toronto, which teaches the Indian martial art form of Kalaripayattu to at risk youth. Hello, Gitanjali ma'am. Welcome to the podcast and thank you for joining us here today.
Hi, Niharika. So nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us. And I'm so glad to have you on board. Just a little bit of a background information. Gitanjali ma'am actually taught me when I was doing my bachelor's, and she's one of the other mentors who inspired me and helped me to get where I am today. She's one of the driving forces in helping me decide and also figure out what I wish to do in my future, because when I came back from masters, I was slightly clueless about what I wanted to do. So I went and attended a workshop with her, and she gladly helped me out. And here I am today, being an educator at Shivnada School. So thank you so much for all of the guidance that you've given me. I would like to get started very quickly with you and ask you the first and foremost question, which I'm curious to know an answer to myself. How did you get started with dance? What was your journey like? And who was the person who inspired you to get started with dance in the first place?
It's one of these very um, haphazard kinds of decisions that you take. So when I was 16 years old, I had studied ballet and jazz dancing in Canada as a teenager because it's the thing that you do when you're a young person in North America. You learn some kind of um, piano or whatever. And I had chosen ballet, and I'd gone for ballet since I was about 6 years old. And then I'd taken up jazz dancing as a teenager. So when I was 16 years old, my parents decided that the West was a terrible influence on me. And they sent me back to India to live with my grandparents. And it wasn't exactly my choice. But once I was there, I decided to make the best of it. And I read an article in a Femina magazine about Kalakshetra. And so you have to remember this is 1970. It's a long time ago. No internet, not even phones. I didn't even call my parents. I sent them letters, and I sent them a letter saying, I want to go to Kalakshetra. Because it's dance. And I basically just wanted to get away from my grandparents' place. I didn't want to live there anymore. And I thought, oh, this is something that my parents might agree to. And so they agreed. And much against my grandparents' wishes, my grandparents were horrified. They sent me to Kalakshetra, and I lived in the hostel. And you know, the reason it's so crazy is I hadn't even seen a Bharatanatyam performance at that point. I'd grown up in Canada from the time I was 6 years old, and I hadn't seen Bharatanatyam. I just, based on the fact that I'd studied ballet and the article in Femina magazine, I thought, okay, let's do this. And because I thought it's a good way to get away from my grandparents. And I mean, not that there's anything wrong with my grandparents. They were very loving, but it was a small town and there wasn't much to do and it was quite boring. And I thought, at least Kalakshetra, there'll be other young people around and I can spend my time dancing. And so I saw Bharatanatyam and I literally fell in love with it. It was, I remember it very vividly. It was Rukmini Devi's choreography of the Ramayana. She had done it in several acts, and I went to see it for the first time after I'd already been studying it. You know, I'd been going for classes and tattaravus, and it was all very painful, and it was like I was rethinking whether this was such a great idea. And the hostel was incredibly strict, the Kalakshetra hostel. You weren't allowed to go out. You were allowed to go out on one Sunday of every month to your guardians. And so it was really crazy. And, but then I saw during the December season, they put on the Ramayana. And I went to the first performance that was really just like falling in love. I saw that dance form and I really felt very deeply attached to it. But I still didn't think, oh, I'm going to be a dancer or anything like that. And then I took my classes a bit more seriously, and I got more involved. I spent a couple of years at Kalakshetra, and then my parents wanted me to come back, so I came back to Canada, and then I came back to India because I thought I can't really live without studying dance. And I studied with Lakshman Sir, Adair Lakshman, and Kalanidhi Narayan, and different teachers. I studied Kuchipudi with Vempati Chinnasatyam, and it was always just, well, this is what I do. I mean, this is what I'm going to do when I'm young. And I never really thought, how am I going to be a dancer? Those kinds of questions didn't really come up. I loved what I was doing, so I just kept doing it. And I married, I had a child. It wasn't like I ever decided I'm going to be a dancer, but I used to do this where I'd go to India and study with my teachers, and then on the way back I'd perform in Europe, and then I started performing more. It's just also a very natural kind of experience. But I always thought, and this is absolutely true, I thought when I grow up I'm going to actually get a real job and do something like a real job. Dancing is never, I mean, nobody lets you think that you can do dancing as a real job. Yeah. Certainly not in the 1970s and 80s. Like my parents always said, now you have to go to university, you have to get, you know, you have to get a real job. And at a certain point I did. I went and studied linguistics and teaching English as a second language. But the truth is I never did it. I just kept on dancing and I just kept on performing and kept on doing things. Now, it's a little bit different in Canada than it is in India, in the sense that you can get grants and you can actually think about making a living. You get paid enough for performances, you get to do workshops, and then you get grants that will cover. So pretty soon it got to be the point where this was all that I did. You know, I never got that real job that people expect, and I just kept on performing and dancing. And so pretty soon there was nothing else I could do. You know, it was like I was in my 30s and I didn't know how to do anything else. So the idea of getting any other kind of job was out of the question. So I just kept performing. So, you know, sometimes things happen just by happenstance rather than setting out to in a particular direction.
That's quite interesting, and I'm curious to ask this question also because I heard that you were studying in Kalakshetra when Dr. Rukmini Devi was still alive. Um, because I'm curious, and I've also heard your other interviews, so I'm just gonna ask you this question. Uh, because there's a lot of conversation on what Rukmini Devi was like as a person and what are the contributions that she made. Being part of Kalakshetra at the time, can you tell us a little bit about who she was as a person and what do you think she did to help Bharatanatyam, or I mean, just a little bit of light on history for us.
Yeah, you know, I have the feeling that I wasn't able to fully appreciate her when I was there as a 16-year-old. So it's in looking back that I see so first of all, there was that incredible choreography that she did, that Ramayana. I mean, all her dance dramas were incredibly beautifully choreographed. And I don't think anybody has fully documented or written about that process of her choreography, how she came to Kalakshetra every single day. Maybe she missed a couple of days, but she was always there at the beginning of our assembly, and we all assembled under a banyan tree. It was just so beautiful. And she's the one who created that. We sang prayers to every god, from Hindu to Muslim to Buddhist to Christian, every prayer. So this idea that she was some kind of Brahmin, or that her approach to dance was Brahmanical, is absolutely ridiculous. She didn't practice that kind of Brahmanism or a fundamentalist kind of Hindu ethos at all. She was incredibly ecumenical. She was incredibly radical in her thinking about dance at that time. And then she created these spectacular, and every morning when she came to the Kalakshetra assembly, she would be wearing another gorgeous sari. Like, her saris were stunning. We'd just be standing there waiting to see what sari Rukmini Devi was wearing that day. She had just the most exquisite taste. Her sense of aesthetics was so supreme, and that really showed up in the dance dramas. Like, the way she had people moving on stage, the kind of compositions she made. I don't see anybody doing that kind of thing to the with that kind of so you'd have all these people on the stage, and then you'd know exactly where to look. And so it would be framed beautifully. Every dancer would be in the right space for us to have that vision. And so her way of thinking of choreography really was very, very special. And I didn't appreciate it at the time because I had nothing to compare it to. But now, having seen people do dance dramas one after the other, where it seems like you randomly take a bunch of people and then fling them onto the stage, and then you don't know where to look, and you don't know where the center of attention is, and people are doing random things here, there, and everywhere. I realized that she was very very adept at that, and bringing out the drama, building the the dance drama up to moments of climax and all those kinds of things she did beautifully. And and she was always very open. So I remember that when and we had things like Shankara Menon used to have lessons in the Gita even after the class was done. So I remember when my mother finally came to visit me at Kalakshetra, she was so open, and she um, met my mother, and she wasn't like somebody who was high and mighty that you couldn't approach. I was too scared to approach her, but my mother certainly wasn't. My mother just went up, and so she was an incredible force of keeping that kind of Kalakshetra um, ethos, aesthetic, and sensibility that she tried to cultivate in all the students. So we had our dance saris had to be a particular way. We had to wash them every single day after practice. We had to wash them ourselves. There was no washing machine or no servant to do that. And we had to come to classes properly made up according to that aesthetic. We had to wear cotton saris only. And if you remember it, I mean, you don't remember obviously, but if you know about that time, that was the time when these saris from Singapore, chiffon and all kinds of fabrics were in fashion, and we weren't allowed to wear them. We were made to wear cotton saris. And so she not only taught us adavus, we had at Kalakshetra, you had theory classes where you learned Abhinay Darpana, the shlokas, and we studied Sanskrit. So a full day's curriculum which included music training, dance, and Sanskrit and theory and folk dance. And I learned how to do kolams, and I learned how to thread jasmine, and I learned how to do embroidery. So all these skills that were part of her kind of imagining what a dancer could be, that didn't just mean being able to do some physical things with your physical body, but kind of represented that kind of like in the Shilapadikaram, that idea of the dancer like Madhvi, who's very accomplished in so many skills, and even in being in discernment, that being able to tell what's good and what's bad, those kinds of things. So she was an amazing, a very revolutionary, very iconoclastic figure.
That's actually quite interesting for you to say that, because yes, you're absolutely right. Dr. Rukmini Devi has been associated with this Brahmanical notion of living and sort of I don't know, if it's right to call it, but kind of the legacy of projecting it forward. But thank you for pointing that out, that she was quite open, and she revered and admired and even respected all religions, regardless of the religion that she belonged to. And now
Well, she wasn't, she was a theosophist, so she had given up her Brahmanical ideas. And I think it's important to point that out, because people keep saying Brahmin, Brahmin, but she wasn't a Brahmin. Her father was a theosophist, and she'd married a theosophist. And so, it's important to keep these kinds of distinctions quite straight.
Thank you so much for pointing that out. I was just a little hesitant to say it, but thank you so much. Historically speaking, and also research wise, there's a lot of material out there that also, of course, there are contradictory perspectives available as well, but it's important to read through all of them and to make oneself aware of the different perspectives that exist and not just sort of follow what is being told as a common notion, because a lot of
Mhm.
times it may be wrong or misrepresented or misguided or even misinterpreted for that matter. So it's important to do your due diligence and research first before we come to a conclusion.
Right.
But thank you so much. I hope that somebody just finds some documentation of her choreographies, because now I'm actually very curious to see how she used to choreograph her pieces and the way that.
Well, all her dance dramas have been documented. So I think if you can access them, you'll be able to see what I mean about how she positions people on stage, how she creates that sense of center of attention, like drawing your attention to one place by the way she places everybody on stage. Really beautifully done. So I didn't mean to say that her dance dramas aren't documented. I meant to say that nobody has actually looked carefully at how she did her choreography and how she came up with these placements.
Right. So documentation of her method is what you were trying to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I think that's also quite important, because you need to get into the head of the choreographer to actually understand the desire and the importance and the need to design the choreography in a certain way. And keeping the kind of visual that you gave us just a moment ago, I think I am quite curious. And now that you've said the choreographies have been documented, I'm going to try and see if, there is a way to get those and, watch those online. I'm assuming it's going to be a little difficult, but hopefully somebody has done something about it, or else we'll
Right.
figure it out.
Yeah.
I have a slightly different question from this for you, but this is also very much a part of your life. And I have been, quite grateful enough to have been associated with this form myself, because it has taught me a lot about my body and how I look at movement. So tell us a little bit about Kalaripayattu. How did you get associated to Kalaripayattu? And I know, as a matter of fact, that Kalaripayat does influence your choreographies, but can you tell us in what way does it influence it, and why do you think you have chosen to let it impact your choreographies?
so so you're going to completely think that I never do anything except I kind of let things happen to me, because it was quite haphazard too. In the early 90s, I was living in Delhi, and I had, even though I went to Kerala, even though I'm from Kerala, I'm from a Syrian Christian background, so that might be one reason. But I've been to Kerala several times, never heard one word about Kalaripayat, never heard nobody told me there's this thing called Kalaripayat. The only thing I'd heard was that the Kerala Kala Mandalam Kathakali school used to have all the people who performed there, they got this particular kind of massage. So I'd heard about this kind of massage, but I didn't know anything more about it. And then I was living in Delhi, and I'd gone to see a play during one of their festivals, where they brought plays from all over India. And it was by Kavala Narayana Panikkar, who's a famous Kerala theater person. And he'd done this incredibly beautiful play. It was really, really effective. The actors, the music, the way the play was done, even though I couldn't understand everything, it moved me so much. And then the next day, they had advertised that they were having a workshop. So I went to the workshop, and I was the only one who had turned up for the workshop. Nobody else in Delhi had bothered to come to this workshop, and I had all these beautiful young men, all men, and Kavala Narayana Panikkar, all their attention was on me. I was the only one who turned up. And So Kavalan, he told me that he used Kalaripayat as a training for his actors. And then they took me through these moves, the kind of like a basic Kalaripayat class. And, you know, you kind of know what that was like. And so I went to Kerala, you know, I kind of got in touch with the main guy at the workshop. He'd given me his details, and Panikkar had also given me his contact information. So I went to Trivandrum and I started doing Kalaripayat there with this guy from his theater group. And then I came back to Delhi. There was nowhere to do it. And then I went to Madras and I couldn't find anybody. And then finally I met my teacher, Binoy. And Binoy came and taught me when I was in Madras. Whenever I was in Madras, he would come and teach me. And then he sent me to his teacher in Kadathurthi. And so I went to Kadathurthi when I was already, you know, I had learned a few of the Mayapaitus and I kind of knew what was going on, and I'd learned a bit. And I went to his teacher, Vasu Gurukul, in Kadathurthi. And then Binoy moved to Paris. And so I didn't have a teacher in India anymore. And so he sent me to the teacher who's my teacher now, Vikas Gurukul, and in Calicut. And so Vikas Gurukul came to SNU and did a workshop, and so that's how I got to Vikas. And I started doing Kalaripayat when in the 90s, because I'd already been dancing for about 20 years and I was suffering from all the problems that dancers have. I had such bad pain in my knees that I couldn't walk up and down the stairs. I had to stairs were a real problem for me. And I'd gone to Western doctors, and Western doctors had said, well, you know, what do you expect? You're using your body in this way. Of course, certain parts of your body are going to suffer. And they didn't offer me very much relief. And I started having the Kalaripayat massage and doing Kalaripayat as a way to maintain my body to be able to do Bharatanatyam. That was the first impulse. The two weren't, I wasn't thinking that, oh, I'm going to use this choreography. It was like, I'm going to maintain my body for Bharatanatyam by doing Kalaripayat. And so that was my first impulse. But then I met Phillip Zarrilli, and Phillip Zarrilli is a theater director who also uses Kalaripayat. And he started, like, we did a production together called Walking Naked about Mahadevi Akka. And he wanted me to use my Kalaripayat training as a way to access movement, states of consciousness, whatever was important for the piece, not for the, but not to think in terms of Bharatanatyam or Kalaripayat, but to think in terms of what is going to make this piece work the best. And so then I started thinking choreographically about just the body. And I stopped thinking about, oh, I'm using Bharatanatyam, oh, I'm using Kalaripayat, and started just thinking about movement and what my body was capable of and what movement would best express or be able to communicate or be able to get the performer into the right state of consciousness. And Kalaripayat is very, very good for that, because being a martial art technique, it's very concerned with your attention, where your presence, and all these are very important to fighting, just as they are to performing. And the relationship between martial arts and dance is a very, very deep one. And you can imagine that there's this kind of crossover. It is in many forms. There's a lot of crossover between fencing and ballet, and Kalaripayat and Kathakali, Kalaripayat and Theyyam. And so to think that these are completely two separate worlds, it occurred to me that it's not quite like that. They're very interconnected worlds. And the thing I love about Kalaripayat is it's a holistic system. It's not just the fighting technique, but it's the healing technique. And you know, this is the first year since I started, because of COVID, that I haven't had that Kalaripayat massage. And I'm very concerned that I should survive this so that I can go back to India and have the Kalaripayat massage, which I think, you know, dancers also need to take care of their bodies and think about healing as well as being able to perform.
You very beautifully put it for me at the very end. But I have to really ask, what was it about uh, learning Bharatanatyam or performing or practicing that actually led to your knees being hurt so bad? Because I think it's important to talk about that, so that
Yeah.
people understand the need for warming up and cooling down, and also taking care of your muscles and your bone structure. So can you tell us a little bit about what
Well,
happened?
yeah, you know, every dance form, I mean, it's not just Bharatanatyam. Ballet is also very hard on the body. It has to be hard on the body in order to be able to do things that are quite, that are not exactly natural to you. It's not the Aramandi position, and then all that stamping in the Aramandi position is very hard on your body. It's hard on your lower back. I mean, I had lots of problems with lower back pain and knee problems. That's where my problems showed up. So maintaining that Aramandi position and then stamping in that Aramandi position is not what it's not exactly what the human body is created to do. So you have to go against your structure in order to be able to do that. And when I was dancing, for example, at Kalakshetra, we danced on a cement floor. We did all our 3 hours of practice on a cement floor. Now you can say, oh, well, that's terrible, and that's not how it should be done. And we know that's not very good. And I think that's why I had knee problems, that I was used to practicing on a cement floor. It wasn't until I went to Delhi and I was studying with Guru Nanak Kasar, that he had a wooden floor in his dance studio. And that was because it was created by the Ford Foundation. And being American, they think about things like that. Like nobody in India seemed to care. Like whatever was most convenient is where you should go and dance. Like nobody really thought, is it good for you to dance in this circumstance? And so when I built my studio here in Toronto, I made sure that I had a sprung floor that was wooden, and that has certainly made a difference to me. Like I can really feel the difference between practicing on a wooden floor and practicing on a cement floor. And you know how it was at SNU. Like they never managed to. They didn't take it seriously, and very few Indian dance studios take it seriously as to what you can do. And I imagine that the original floor was an earth floor, and an earth floor does give you just the right amount of resistance probably, and is not that super hard floor that that doesn't give at all. So a wooden sprung floor or an earthen floor, which is what we have for kalaripayat. Kalaripayat is on an earth floor, and those kinds of things are very, very important to maintaining your ability to work at a high level for a long period of time. And what you said, warm-ups and cool downs, for me, they're important. I don't know about for anybody else, but for me, it's very important that I be able to be warmed up before I start my practice, because otherwise it's very, very easy to do something that that just gives you a twist or a cramp, or something goes slightly wrong, and then it completely it gets worse and worse rather than better and better. So I'm a firm believer in that. I've always tried to teach my classes in that way, but oh, and an understanding of how the body works. I think that's really important too, because people say aramandi, and then they say sit, 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 but they don't tell you how. And those pelvic muscles have to open, and you can't just sit, sit, sit without kind of getting stress in some wrong place, like sticking your bum out so that you can get lower and lower, or putting tension up in your arms because you're so focused on sitting. And my Guru Nanak Kasar always used to say, and I think this is a very important one, everybody has their own aramandi. There is no set aramandi. This is not like this can be a square, and somehow or the other you have to make a square. And anybody can see you can't possibly make a square. Our femur is longer than the shin bone. So you have to find your aramandi. And he said, he always used to say, when you find your aramandi, then you'll be comfortable. You won't be stressed. It won't be like hard work to maintain that aramandi. And in the same way, the Natya Rambe position is very difficult. It's hard on those muscles. So if you're not strengthening, if you're not doing exercises to maintain that structure, it'll always feel very strenuous. And so that, I think in pedagogy, that's what needs to be stressed to students, that you're not trying to deform your body, but you're trying to find where is that aramandi in your body.
That is actually amazing and something that is worth noting down. Although there are only, I do know a couple of people who are looking at it from this perspective, but I also know that on a larger scale, this kind of conversation, like you said, this pedagogical approach is missing on many fronts. And I think it's important to understand the need for it and correct it today, because the younger generation, the ones who are coming up to be artists now, will somehow be able to protect themselves from future harm. It, I mean, I have seen this and I've heard stories about artists and dancers, particularly, having to go for knee injuries or knee replacements and things like that, because they have struggled and worked so hard and put so much of tension on their knees that they have had issues and they could not walk anymore, and they had to go through knee surgeries and even hip surgeries for that matter, to just survive for the rest of the amount of time that they have, and even dance for that matter. So this is actually a true situation that we are all a part of, and it's unfortunate to hear and even acknowledge the fact that we are quite ignorant of this very important requirement for all dancers and all artists, because at the end of the day, you may be able to produce many artists, but you're essentially reducing their performance life and cutting it into half or maybe even lesser based on how much of tension and stress you're putting in on these dancers' bodies.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that information. And I'm going to reiterate what you just said, which is also equally important, that every Aramandi, every body has its own Aramandi, and every Aramandi is going to be different from the rest. There's not going to be a universal way of maintaining Aramandi in the body, or a universal Natyarambe position that will, be able to sustain each and every body's needs. Uh, I'm actually quite thankful for you to, be able to say it here, and I'm actually thankful and grateful to your guru as well, because I think at the time when you were learning, it is definitely something. I would say I would call it a gem per se, because not everybody was aware of these things, and the approach towards performance and dancing at the time was not aimed at artists' health or dancers' health and their nutrition and how they are dealing with it, but rather on just getting the content ready and getting the performance ready and producing artwork. So I think I'm also equally thankful to your guru for giving this kind of a lesson to you, and for you to be able to say this to us at this point today.
Thank you all for tuning into Movement and Me, an initiative that is designed for budding artists across the world. To continue receiving notifications on our latest episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel Natya Mandalam, or look us up on Apple Podcasts or Spotify for more information. I'm your host Niharika, and I'll see you all next week.